All right, welcome to another episode of the Educators Podcast. I am Mr. Burden, also known as AA Ron, and I am known as AA Ron to my guest at this time, one of my brothers in the trenches, especially, in fact, he joined our team when we were knee deep in the pandemic. We all arrived at White Oaks Elementary at the same time on the same grade level, an entirely new team, and we definitely bonded in the trenches and had to get through rather interesting year to start a new school. But he is not only a good friend of mine and colleague, but he is also a very, very skilled bodybuilder who just won, award-winning bodybuilder who just crushed it in a deadlift competition. He does not want to be photographed today. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. He does not want to be photographed today. You're going to have to wait. You're going to, he's a very, very private person. We had some issues with TMZ. We had some, issues with People Magazine. So please respect his privacy. But I want to welcome to my show the incomparable Mr. Kiel Phillips.
Well, what an entrance! What an entrance, right? Dun 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 dun. Fireworks and all the flash, right?
Yes, I'll add that in post.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Well, hey, everybody, what's going on? As Aaron mentioned, I'm Mr. Phillips. We definitely entered into the profession together on a very wacky note.
Yes.
I mean, anyone that got hired as a first year contractually first year teacher during the pandemic, wow. I mean, it's just, if you could make it through that year, I think you were pretty good to go.
I agree. I will say this, though. I feel like if there was going to be like an Avengers team to assemble to take over fourth grade during that time, the four of us, we were the right people at the right time, I felt. You know what I mean?
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's because we came into it with no prejudice or bias.
Yes.
So we kind of had a united front, and I think that really carried through the whole year. So
I think we surprised a lot of people too. Like how and some like feedback I got in like planning meetings and whatnot, it's like we had our system together. Each of us took a different kind of point on something, but we all supported each other. You and Nat were running the for the mostly face-to-face front.
yeah.
But tell me, how did that feel? How did you feel? I mean, first of all, translocating from Pittsburgh, where Yins and all that John is. I'm trying on my Pittsburgh slang there. Hope you.
Well, very correct grammatical use of the vernacular Yins. That's how you use it for sure.
But how did that feel moving on down from where? And you were more like in the Montessori school environment before you came down to Virginia Beach, right?
Yeah. So the school I was at. So quick background: I worked for Pittsburgh Public Schools for 4 years. The reason for my move is because after working for that school district for 4 years, pretty much giving them my all, any position, I'll do this, even going through a master's program that the school district paid for.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 interviews in 4 years. I really thought maybe my ego was a little inflated because, I'm a guy. I'm in elementary. I was being told a lot, like, I'm the hot ticket. Like, you're a dude in elementary. Like, how are you not hired? So every year I kind of had this is my year. This is my year. When the world ended there, I kind of took the risk, threw the dice, realized Pittsburgh Public Schools was not going to hire me going into the 4th year, and I had to make a dramatic change. Here we are, Virginia Beach. Fast forward, here we are, Virginia Beach. So the relocation was fun. It was my version of the Oregon Trail, I would say. No one died of dysentery, right?
I was going to say no dysentery along that route.
No, but it was fun. I mean, because I worked a lot of different positions for Pittsburgh Public Schools. And as Mr. Bird mentioned, I was in the uh, Montessori school.
Eh, Tell us
I'll
a
say
little bit about
Montessori.
Montessori. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say it's like Montessori adjacent. Okay, because
Okay.
there's only a very few, like in the single digits, Montessori schools that are certified Montessori schools. To be Montessori certified as a teacher, you have to go through lots of training. You
Hmm.
have to I mean, it's very rigorous.
Yeah, a
Um,
lot of people have that misconception that a Montessori school, you just turn the kids loose in a room and you just sit back and watch. It's nothing like that.
no, so it was still very much public school. So it was public school through the lens of Montessori. So
Gotcha.
a lot of the stuff we were doing was the public school curriculum, and then we would have to differentiate or adapt that using all the Montessori, either the physical tools or whatever teachers had in their toolbox, getting creative with it.
Hmm.
So I long term subbed there, and I was at the same school for 3 of my 4 years, just to say. But the 1 year I long term subbed, um, and then it just becomes apparent to you once you get involved
Yeah.
how much time and work goes into the Montessori background. So we'll take the concept of time, for example. So
Hmm.
in my classroom, I had probably 20 students, but that was so many first graders, so many second graders, and so many third graders. Now, even just saying that sentence, most people look at you and their eyeballs just fall out
Yeah.
of their head because they're like, what?
Yeah.
um
That's a
and
mix,
it's
man.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a lot to manage, but once the gears start turning and you kind of see how it works, it really becomes self-sufficient because the driving force is to create self-directed individuals,
Hmm.
where they're really taking charge of their learning. You're really just the sheep herder leading the sheep, right? And they're the ones that kind of take it and run with it. You just kind of lead them to the field. um, so going back to the concept of time, um, now for first grade needed to know time to the first hour, half hour. Okay. Second grade needed to know all of that hour, half hour, then quarter till, quarter past, Um, and then third grade needed to know all of the previous, also to
Hmm.
the minute, to the second, everything. So when I'm doing my small groups, for example, I'll start with a whole group lesson where we kind of review, and you're exposing the first graders and second graders to those harder concepts, still reviewing the
Hmm.
foundational skills that they need to know, but kind of leaning more towards the third graders, because once you excuse everyone to their independent stations, you're going to really hone in on those first grade level skills when they're in
Yeah.
your small groups. So when
Gotcha.
they come to
Gotcha.
your group, I have lesson plans just for first grade, for the first grade standards, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing my lesson with them. Second grade is doing either something with a partner or independent. Third grade is either doing the opposite. So if second graders are working with a partner, I have third grade doing an independent task or vice
Okay.
versa. When
That
I
doesn't sound much different than like differentiation. It's how many students are in the classroom total, including all three grades?
There was anywhere from like, it was never more than 25. So I would have maybe like
Okay.
six first graders, maybe 6 and 6, that's 18. But like, you would have like a sprinkle in, like you might have like seven
Wow.
second graders. So your small groups were always 6 to 7. Really, you never really had more than that. Um, and then, so, you ring your bell, your chime, whatever, your gong, and then everyone rotates just like you do small groups in the general education setting. But then it's like I have to take my first grade plans, move them to the side, grab my second grade plans,
Yeah.
boom, and then I'm teaching the second grade standard, and then boom, then it's the third grade standard. So I was doing 3 times the amount of work as far as lesson planning and
Hmm.
manipulatives and small group rotations. And because then you have to think, as soon as you excuse your first grade group, well, uh, you need small group lessons for first graders, or second graders or third
Yeah.
graders.
Independent stations. Yeah.
Yeah, but where the self direction really comes in, and like where the students really take hold of it, is let's say you have a third grader that really is excelling with the concept of time, and you just have a first grader that's just really not understanding it. Well, if you're working with second graders, you can point, or you can just say, hey, I need you to pair up with so and so, and I need you to work with them. Or pull a third grader over and say, hey, so and so in first grade's really having trouble. Can you work with them on this worksheet? Because as you and I or any educator knows, the best way to learn something is to teach it to
Hmm.
others. So that's kind of where the self direction really came in. And then the kids take ownership of like, oh, I really do know this stuff because I just taught so and so how to do it. And that's really the
Yeah.
main goal of where you want to get to with the Montessori, and a lot of it is hands-on manipulatives. Um, yeah. So,
How was it getting funding for manipulatives? I mean, were you able to get enough, or was it a struggle?
we had of we had over a decent amount, is what I'll say. Um,
Good.
we had a lot of the traditional Montessori manipulatives as far as like math goes. Definitely for math, they were very math heavy with the manipulatives.
Did you have
Um,
enough plastic bears?
we had beads, actually. We have this
Oh,
thing called
okay.
the bead stare, and it's just imagine like someone's beaded curtain, right? In a
Uh-huh.
living, right? But it's the way it's set up is it looks like a big diagonal, like the beads incrementally increase. So when you're
Oh,
talking,
okay.
and they're on a chain, so it helps when you're talking about multiples, right? Because you could have a
Oh,
chain
cool.
and there's like three beads with a
Hmm.
link, three beads with a link, and then you can take the chain and you can be like, oh, how many groups of three? One, two, three, and then it's very visual. You can see three groups of three. That there's nine if you count them individually. So it gets very visual and hands-on.
Very cool.
Um, so, but again, we always had to err on the side of caution because we weren't a traditional Montessori school. We still had to adhere to all the public school curriculum and
Yeah.
recommendations. And as far as the teachers go, as I mentioned before, we were all doing, every teacher in that building was doing three times the amount of work, getting paid the same amount as someone that just taught first grade. There was no differentiation in pay. Even teachers that were classically Montessori certified, they got a slight bump, still doing the same amount of work. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, our school, I mean, that school did have a you did have to apply. It wasn't just like anyone come in.
Yeah.
So you did have to apply and kind of go through the process. And it was pre-K to fifth grade. So yeah,
Gotcha. Wow.
yeah, it was
So
intense.
so that was your world before becoming a full-on teacher, but I mean you were doing three times the work, it sounded like. Was but your role wasn't even an official teacher, but you were doing that role, right?
Correct. Yeah, I was a long-term sub.
Long-term sub. Yeah.
I started out as a tutor just to kind of get my foot in the door. Um, and I got, I was getting paid a fairly decent amount. I was getting paid per hour per diem.
Uh-huh.
But obviously, I didn't have like any of the benefits or insurance or any of that other stuff. And I only had to work for 4 or 5 hours a day. And then it was like, peace, I'm out of here. And, I could go do whatever I wanted to go do with the rest of my day.
Hit the
Um,
gym, of course. Go to the
yeah,
gym. That's where you went. We
gym
know.
or, my other job. And then I taught Spanish for a year, just for
Oh,
the
bueno.
audience to know. I'm not Hispanic. I don't speak Spanish. However, the language arts uh, role at my school was the equivalent of Harry Potter's Defense Against the Dark Arts. Every year I worked at that school had a new teacher, a different teacher every year, and that's why I always equated it to was like the Harry Potter version of Defense Against the Dark Arts, because every movie there was like a new professor, right?
Meanwhile, Senor Snape has always wanted to teach that class, but instead he's stuck teaching, I don't know, it's teaching basket weaving or something.
Yeah, and I mean, it was pretty. I don't know the correct word here, but it was. So there was a staff member at that school that spoke fluent Spanish. They did not pick him to teach Spanish class. They asked
Snape.
me to teach Spanish class, and when I inquired about it, the principal said I would rather any class go to foreign language and be better managed than the curriculum basis, because what was happening is teachers were complaining that, oh, they would be going to Spanish with Mr. So and so, and they would come back and it would just be an absolute zoo.
Oh,
And there were just way too many complaints of his lack of classroom management skills that the principal was like, hey, I just need someone that can just like get these kids not to treat it like recess. um, so I
yeah.
spent a year learning Spanish, making my own Spanish plans, teaching Spanish as best I could. and and then, hey man, March happened, and the world ended, as we all know. So
How do you conjugate yins in Spanish? Like
I'm pretty sure it's just yins. I think that's it.
yo soy yins, two
Yeah,
eris yins, two yins. I don't know. No
yeah.
sotros. That's
Uh,
that's
but I
crazy. But
mean,
I mean, did that help you? That throwing you into the fire of having to teach something you had no background in. Did that help you? Do you feel like that helped you at all?
I got to have a lot of fun with it because the principal did set me up with one of the heads of the department of
Mm-hmm.
the foreign language department for the entire school district. So, um, on a personal level, she kind of got to know me, and she kind of knew the situation with the school. Um, she really just encouraged me just to take it and have fun with it and just make it my own, and not be so strict with the curriculum because the curriculum was very dry.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
we know about that.
yeah. So I mean, it was fun. I was really making some headway with it, and then boom, pandemic. Um, and I just, instead of like railing against it, with my fourth and fifth grade classes, because they're so involved with technology, I kind of took a lot of the pressure off me
Hmm.
and kind of put it on them. And we were in the beginning works of a research project, um, where they were going to pair up, and I was going to have them pick a country where the native language is Spanish, and we were going to research it. We were going to present. We were going to, and as a in each class that I met with, because there were three classes in each class that I met with. I mean, we turned it into a whole project, such
Very
as
cool.
what are some questions that you think you should research, and as a class we talked about, okay, well, that's a good question, but are you going to find a lot of information on that? And
Yeah.
we had a whole list of possible questions, and then we narrowed it down to like the meat and potatoes that bare bones everyone should have at least these whatever questions. And I kind of just cut them loose. I let them research it. We showed them how to write down notes, and I thought that they were going to learn a lot more from that than me trying to like halfway teach them a language I don't speak. I thought they were going
Yeah.
to learn a little more from that, and I figured they were going to learn a little bit more, um, educational skills, research, writing, ask and answer questions, determining importance, putting something together, and then, presenting, mini, public speaking skills. And yeah, we really were having fun with that. And then, and then, that, well, stopped. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
2 weeks to stop the spread. Don't worry about it. We'll be back. Oh.
Yeah. Um, so, but I
So
feel
what?
like
How did
that
that? What did they say? Did they? How did they present it to you? Did they say, all right? Did they have Chromebooks like we did in Virginia Beach? Like, did they have something they could take home?
we had pretty outdated desktop computers. Um, they weren't like the monitor with the tower. It was kind of like the monitor is like the whole unit all in one.
Gotcha.
Um, and they weren't fantastic. We had a couple iPad carts that needed updated. But the technology was there. Um, but I feel like stepping into that it really helped me become more flexible, become more adaptive,
Hmm.
stepping out of my comfort zone and really, how do I
Exactly.
rise to the challenge, because not everything you do in education is going to be, tea and crumpets, right? It's not going to be fun. Sometimes it's really hard. And
Yeah, just find a way to make Jamestown interesting to a bunch of kids that want to play Among Us or TikTok.
yeah, so and I really, instead of like looking at it like a mountain, like how am I going to climb this? I kind of was like, okay, let's start off with the basics and let's just have some fun with it. Like, because I knew I wasn't required to like test them or assess them like officially in any
Yeah.
way. Like nothing was like going to hold them back academically. Um, so I just was really trying to have fun with it. We did a lot of songs, we did a lot of dance, and I thought that experience helped me, and I carried that over to White Oaks Elementary. So
It sounded a lot more immersive. Do you feel like there was more there was more freedom in just saying in the principal saying just hey just let it rip rather than like having you like being much more of a micromanager? Like, do you feel like there was much more freedom, and do you feel like that freedom translated into more effective teaching?
oh, without a doubt, hands down. I mean, I knew there were eyes on me. I mean, because we use the computer lab and there's like a camera right in the corner of the computer lab. So like I knew I was being observed, but
Yeah,
also the principal was more so concerned about the management of the classes. She wasn't
yeah.
extremely concerned about the curriculum. Um, when you say it, you're like, oh my God, I wasn't concerned about the curriculum, but
Hmm.
I feel like it was kind of like you gotta give a little to get a lot, and they kind of gave up a little bit of the requirement of the curriculum, but on the back end they got a lot out of far as like classroom management and kind of open-ended, you know, uh, question researching and kind of working more with pairs. And it's not it, we I turned it more so from like uh, call and repeat. I mean, how many foreign language classes have we taken where the instructor's like, say this to your partner, blah blah blah. I kind of put it more on their shoulders.
Hmm.
So yeah.
And what were some of the strategies you used for the for behavior management, or was it a simple magic pill, or was it more of a long term build?
I mean, so the teacher that I filled in for was in that position at the beginning of the year. And me as the building sub, I would report to the school every day, and pretty much they'd be like, "Hey, Mr. Phillips, you're so and so today. Here's their plans. Hey, you're here today. Here's your plans."
Hmm.
Um, and then I came in one day. They're like, "Hey, you're this for the rest of the year." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Okay.
Um, and why am I? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what was the
No,
question.
it
Sorry.
was more
It
just
was
like what were some of the strategies you used to kind of because it takes a lot to, especially if you're coming in as a sub, but it takes a lot to really establish a community where the with the guidelines to control behavior. And it sounded like this was a class that was notorious, or this was a class that had a reputation of being a struggle, like you said.
Oh yeah,
What
I
were
mean,
some of the things that you did? Yeah,
and this is plural. This is classes. This was
yeah.
any class that went to Spanish, whether it was the pre-K, the first grade, or they call it lower elementary. So lower elementary is first, second, third, and then upper elementary is fourth and fifth. It didn't matter whose classroom went to Spanish; they always came back like the zoo. And
Was it like they went there and ate a bunch of candy and came back all hyped up?
yeah, I mean, well, it wasn't that. It was just so much like the guy that was running it just he reminded me of Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
No.
Like, anyone,
Anyone?
anyone, the Laffer curve. Any like it was he was so dry, and it was
Hmm.
just coloring and worksheets, and it's like, bro, come on, man, like you gotta razzle dazzle them a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was working at the school a couple years, like I said, 3 out of the 4 years, and I was already kind of established at that school. So a lot of the students knew me because
Hmm.
I was all over the building. Um, and stepping into that role in a more air quotes permanent fixture, I kind of just from day one established, hey, my rules when I'm a sub, those rules apply today. Moving forward, I'm going to be the guy you see, and then I kind of just was like, I expect you to meet my expectations. If you don't, well, then, see you later.
Yeah.
And, just kind of took over. But it started on day one, but it was also, like I said, the kids knew me as a sub. So they knew how I ran my room as a substitute, or if I was stepping in as like an aide for a day and I was co-teaching with I would always try to, teach their culture, because every classroom's like a mini culture. And I would always
Hmm.
try to teach that homeroom teachers culture, like their rules and
Yeah.
their expectations. And I think just kind of the continuity, I just carried it through from subbing and tutoring into the, like I said, air quotes, more permanent role of Senior Phillips.
Senor
Yeah,
Phillips.
Senior Phillips.
Yes. So you arrive, you pick up your bags and move to Virginia Beach, and you show up and you meet your three partners in crime over fajitas and drinks at Gran Rodeo.
Yeah.
And how was that? How did that go? What did you think of your three partners in crime there?
I honestly didn't know what to expect. I just went into it just so I was elated that, in a very selfish way, I had a contract. I had benefits. I finally got it. Like, I was like the holy grail. I finally like paid my dues. Like, as you
Mhm.
mentioned in the introduction, like in the trenches, like no man's land, and I just felt like I finally got what I worked so hard for,
Nice.
as far as being like a contractual teacher to a school. I wasn't just a sub anymore. Like, um, so I kind of just went into it open minded. I really had no expectations going into it. I was just so excited. I was like, this
Mhm.
is going to be 1,000 times better. Doesn't matter what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And how was that first year bouncing back and forth between virtual and face to face and the masks and the washing the desks and all the CDC guidance that we had that year?
I think anyone that was in the building um, would tell you that every day we did the best that we could. I
Hmm.
mean, that was such a foreign territory globally. I mean,
Yeah.
no one in the world ever in our lifetimes has ever seen or experienced something to that magnitude. So I feel like in the building, we were just doing the best we could every day, and just not constantly reminding the students, but just, reminding them like, hey, this is a life altering experience that no one has ever seen before. Um, and it was a struggle because, uh, up until that point, as a society, we had no backup plan for something like that. We had no, they were all just, well, what ifs? And then the what ifs became, well, now it's happening.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it had its challenges for sure. All the rules, the regulations, and at points I was getting frustrated because I felt like I was getting paid to police mask wearing, where it's like, really, is that in my contract? I'm paid to make sure they're wearing their mask, which I understand, safety guidelines, but it's sometimes it was just kind of like, whew,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very, yeah. Don't get me started. There was the whole thing about word study. All right. Here's what you want to do for word study. Pull your mask down, say the word, and then put it back up. I'm like, uh, that's kind of defeating the whole purpose of wearing a mask. But
Yeah.
I just yeah. What was interesting too, because Mallory and I we took the virtual side, and you were talking about how there wasn't a really solid plan, and we actually rewrote a lot of the lessons because they were asking for like the lessons they sent us were the old lessons that were quite that were written as if the kids are face to face, sharing Play-Doh, and I'm like, well, how are the kids, the kids aren't going to be able to share the Play-Doh if they're all at home.
Well,
It's just
sharing Play-Doh, but also every kid somehow is
turned.
is expecting to be able to read on a fourth grade reading level, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, that too. And like the pandemic didn't happen. We got through it, and then we came back, and it was all of us in the building. Natalie, she went down to first
Mhm.
grade. She bailed on us. No, she's cool, but yeah, that's what she wanted to do. But we got our new crew the following year, and like I feel I want to know what your thoughts were, but I kind of feel like the lockdowns, the pandemic, and a lot of things kind of exposed, definitely in education. Do you feel like the lockdowns and the pandemic exposed what was really important in education, and perhaps what was lacking in the
So,
education system?
yeah, I would say that first year, I didn't really see uh, the damage that the pandemic had or was going to have on
Mhm.
our youth and young minds. Like that was not very apparent to me until that second year when we were, back in the building. Um, that really showed me how detrimental that year off was to
Mhm.
a lot of young minds.
Yeah.
Um, and as far as classroom placement, I mean, that was in my years of teaching, that was the hardest classroom I have ever had the pleasure of being assigned. Um, that was my classroom equivalent of the Legion of Doom. And those those kids, I mean, they just all of the all of the pressure and all of the things from the pandemic were just boiling over, right? And they don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing. They're just, they're kids. They're 9, 10, and
Mhm.
all they can do is do. And what they were doing was just, reacting to the situation. But it
Mhm.
was it was just really coming very, very apparent that second year, um, how important it is to have a routine and consistency and uh, that community feel, sitting in your living room eating hot Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew, playing Fortnite for a straight year. And then you
Yeah.
come back to, hey, we got rules and we got procedures and like there's protocol. And it really just flipped these kids upside down. And, I think that group is going to have a struggle for a very long time academically just because that year really, you know, robbed them in a way. I mean, it was, it was a situation. It was the best that we could do at the time. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like in third grade is such a formative year because that's that, like Erickson says, that's that year where they're going, they're finding their identity. It's like they're no longer learning to read, they're reading to learn. They're kind of becoming who they are. And it's and to have that to spend that year, yeah, eating hot Cheetos and Takis and playing Fortnite
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
doing TikTok videos. Yeah, that robs a lot. And of course we saw it. I felt like we were all doing triage from an
Oh, yeah.
academic
It was,
standpoint, let
yeah.
alone coping skills and behavior management. But I felt like we were doing triage and I felt so bad for them. But do you feel like the education system like it wanted us to act like there never was a pandemic? I mean, do you feel like our expectations were back to all right, get back to teaching, and we're like, but look
Oh,
what just
my.
happened.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that we kept hearing, staying on pace and staying. I'm just it's laughable because it was like staying on pace with what? We're trying to stay on pace as if the world just didn't take a year off. Like and hearing those conversations from, up coming down. I mean, it was like the realistic thing to do is to just step back, you know, I say take the loss, but I mean like just step back, take the loss and just we really as a group, as an organization, as a school, we really should have focused on all right, where are these kids now?
Hmm.
Where do they need to be? Like what are the most important things skill wise? Where do they need to be? And let's like jump into the deep end and focus on those. Instead, it was, okay, we gotta catch up, and it's just like catch up to what? I mean,
Yeah,
what are we
the
catching up
train
to?
has
I
left
mean,
the
like,
station. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's not coming back, and the pacing was way out of whack.
Yeah.
Um, and
The
I just
pace.
feel like that year just should have slowed down. I mean, the last year I felt like because it was our second year, we kind of started gaining some traction back to the rules and the procedures and everything.
Mhm.
But that second year, as you're saying, yeah, we definitely should have just been like, skirt, let's pump the brakes. But no, that was not the case,
I
unfortunately.
I would have felt I would have rather they just kind of said, "All right, get this, do the best you can." Kind of that what they said with you at the Spanish class,
Yeah.
because we were coming into, and even at that time we were still wearing masks. We still had all these protocols, and it wasn't until I think April that the mask thing went away. Which is funny because I spent the whole year, I never saw the mouths of most of my kids, and then this kid walks in without a mask. I'm like, "Who are you?" "Oh, hey, you're so and so." But
Yeah.
like I felt like that would have been a great opportunity, and almost from an experiment standpoint too, is okay, teachers, you have agency. These are the standards. Do the best you can, and get these kids to caught up on the fundamentals that are going to help them for going forward. But instead, it was almost like, all right, we're back now. You got to get them to all these things where they were supposed to be, but if there wasn't a pandemic. And I thought that was insane.
Yeah, I mean, just taking, speaking your teacher love language, math, we could have, I feel like with math that second year, we really, I
Yeah.
don't want to say we should have just cut out geometry like completely, but I do feel the focal point in fourth grade should have been a lot more focus on fractions and decimals,
Hmm.
converting, equivalency,
Yeah.
adding, subtracting. Because moving into fifth grade, like the expectancy is they should be able to do that fluently, but instead we that wasn't the focus. The focus was like, okay, spaghetti method, throw everything at the wall and just spend extra time in small groups. And now that's not to say like learning the concepts of geometry are not important,
Hmm.
but given the
You got to
circumstances, I
pick your
mean,
battles.
we had to look at the greater picture. And
Yeah.
if the expectancy moving forward is that come fifth grade, like word problems with fractions and decimals, then we should have been spending way more time with that. um like that's just one concept in my opinion. So
I agree. No, in fact, like I feel like a lot of the problems were already there before COVID. Because I'm you and I've talked about this before, that the pacing itself was asinine before COVID. Like the way the ramp up from first grade to going into fourth grade is, I mean, it's supposed to build off of each other, but we shot ourselves in the foot when we took away the rote practice, the like flashcards, and the times table, and like they a lot of times throughout my teaching career, the kids coming to me were still counting on their fingers, when there's certain things they should know. 2 + 3 = 5. They should
yeah,
have that,
yeah,
by the time they
that should
come to
be
me.
automatic.
Exactly. And that was before COVID. And then to put all these things on and have this pacing that was just crazy. I agree. I think we were focusing on putting checks on boxes rather than what was actually good for these kids. And which gets me to another thing. Like, do you feel like, it sounded like maybe it was just word service, but it sounded like the direction Virginia Schools is trying to go, but they don't know how to do it. But focusing more on student growth, individual student growth, rather than achieving a standard.
I feel like that's where they're going now because we have the growth measures assessments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, even just talking about the growth measures assessment, um, we still don't have a baseline data for the scores. I mean, here we are, year two of doing these growth measures assessments, and we have the stain score at the end, and you'll ask your reading specialist or math coach, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, downtown doesn't really have an answer for that right now because like we're still collecting the data on the growth measures."
Yeah.
Um, so again, like you said, checks on boxes. Like we're just kind of doing this, just kind of like okay, um, with no real guidance or direction. Um, Now, as far as a teacher goes, I mean, you can see black and white from
Yeah.
growth measures from, September to I forget when we do the second round of growth measures. I mean, you can see on paper black and white, improvement, not improvement. Okay, here's where they need to focus.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where they're growing at. So, um, I like that feedback, but it'd be nice to see how it all correlates in a
Hmm.
district or as a school, like where's the school at.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it definitely, as you said, exposed a lot of the gaps and the faults in our I want to say outdated curriculum,
Yeah.
you know. So
I feel, and I do feel like there's like as as much as Virginia Beach schools, which I hear from a lot of teachers in other districts, the same thing, as much as they try to say everything, like come out with something new every year, a lot of times it's just the old stuff repackaged. I feel like there's a lot of things we do, like being a salaried employee but signing in and out on a timesheet. There's a lot of there's a lot of things we do that are just that don't make any sense. Yeah, that was there was
sorry.
that was a no, that was a little yeah, you know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
because oh, I'm getting a phone call. Somebody wants me to come in and do my timesheet from last year.
Oh no.
You didn't do your timesheet after October. Yeah, well, there's a reason. Um, but yeah, it's like I feel like sometimes we're still trying to go to teach towards old habits in a much and just people society is so different now. I mean, like technology now, with writing papers and whatnot, we have to not only do we have to be these superhuman teachers where we're not only an instructor, but we also have to be the mom, the dad, the nurse, the doctor. We're like a game show host. We're having to keep them all excited about stuff that they have that they're like they're a hostile customer. That you have to convince them that this is cool stuff for them to learn. Now, not every student's like that. There's some students that they love that kind of stuff. But let's be honest, when there's a lot of kids who'd rather be home eating Takis, playing Fortnite, or doing a TikTok dance, we're having to make Jamestown sound interesting. Like,
Don't get me started. When I have to teach Jamestown for 14 weeks, I'm kind of like, all right.
we could have, what we could have done, what we should have done, we should have just said, listen, Jamestown, it was a place. They got there. A bunch of people died in 1609. Things got better. Now we're cool. All right, now get out your fraction blocks and
Yeah. What
yeah,
percent? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What
What's the
fraction?
fraction equivalency of survivors to dyers?
Yeah, there were 100 colonists in 1609. 50 of them were gentlemen. What fraction of them? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we should have done. We should have just said thrown
Yeah.
Jamestown out the window. Yeah, it does seem like we had some, and it seems like, I remember right before COVID, there was this math crisis. There were like everybody, the whole
Oh yeah.
district was talking about, oh, the math skill. Oh, we got to focus on math. We got blah blah. And then COVID happens, and obviously that math crisis got better, or so that just nobody
Yeah.
talked about it. And then when we came back, all of a sudden now there's a science crisis, and
Correct. Yes.
and it's like, really, is that the crisis? Because I kind of think maybe we ought to look at what happened over the last 3 years and focus on fixing that rather than worrying about the science crisis. I mean, if they learn anything, and if as long as they learn scientific investigation, that's the crux of science. We can let's get their times table facts up first before we worry about science.
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean to rant on you, but it's just that this. All right, how did
Well,
how do you feel? What's
there
that?
was something I wanted to go back to.
Go ahead.
Actually, you said something, and I started thinking, um, and you said every year something new comes out, and it's just kind of something that's repackaged from old curriculum. Well, that leads to a greater question: why as an organization, teachers, education, why as an organization, why is that? Why do we always find ourselves gravitating back to something that's old and then repackaging? It's almost like you go to a restaurant and they don't have a bananas Foster. They have like some new wave thing of the bananas Foster, and you try it and you're like, well, that's not. It's good, but it's not as good as an OG bananas Foster. So it's like if
Yeah.
it can't replace it, then don't even attempt it. I'm not saying like don't. Well, I shouldn't say like don't attempt it, but it's like if you haven't fine tuned it, then why are we like painting it a different color and trying to say it's new because it's not. But yeah, you're right. We just kind of keep as a pendulum. We kind of swing away, and then we come back, and then we kind of are like, "Oh, look at this new thing," and we're like, "No, not really new." It's just we never really focused on it or gave it time to come to fruition. Because the pendulum started swinging away from it, and it's like, "Oh, remember this thing?" So sorry, that was just yeah.
No, absolutely. This is big stuff for me. I mean, you know how I feel about the word study. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I
Yes,
for
same.
like I taught for 10 years, and I was a big proponent of like getting kids like book clubs and getting kids excited about the books. Like when we would make those calls, like when the curriculum would tell you that we needed to read Uncle Blue's Trench Coat or whatever, the it won a bunch of awards. It was like super boring.
Yeah.
But then we all decided, nah, let's do the radioactive underpants instead, and the
Yeah.
kids loved it.
Creepy
You know,
pair of underwear was
creepy
awesome.
under that was the like creepy underpants, and the kids love that. And yet, and they didn't give a crap about Uncle Blue's trench coat or any whatever
Yeah,
that was.
no.
But but like I remember sitting there, and it's like that's one of those things that really irks me. Is it's like we have degrees in education. We are on the front line. That's like our professional development is daily,
Mhm.
is when we're in the trenches. And then somebody that hasn't been in the classroom for years, if not ever, and may only have 3 years of teaching experience, is now telling us what we're supposed to be doing
Or an
based on
assistant or
some.
an assistant principal, believe it or not.
Yes,
Wow,
and
wow.
well, and I want to touch on some things about that, because I think some of the things you had to deal with, I think, is illustrative. It illustrates a lot of what's wrong with our system, anyways. But how many times did you and I and our team sit in these collaborative planning let's sessions? I mean, granted, we were lucky. We had a pretty cool math coach, and Don was pretty cool too. And Kim and Don were awesome. But
I
like,
mean, rock stars all around.
but he just we almost didn't. They made up for some of the chaos we had elsewhere.
Yes.
But like we'd sit there, and it's just the stuff coming from downtown. Let me ask this question to you,
Sure.
because you've now worked for two different principals in the same school.
Yeah.
And how different was it working that first full year in the school versus under the Vaughn administration?
Um, it definitely showed me what happens when someone who's in a leadership role, aka the principal, it definitely showed me what happens whenever that individual becomes complacent in their ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just from being in the school district going now into my fourth year, I was informed that the former superintendent would only allow principals to be at a school for X number of years, and then they had to switch to a different school.
Yeah.
Um, the superintendent that stepped in then vetoed that and said, "Nope, you can stay at the school indefinitely." Um, and I just feel like that helped or not helped. That uh,
Made
came
it worse.
with yeah, it made it worse in a way that, like I said, complacency. Those
Yeah.
people would get in and um, they needed to something needed to change, and um, and it was
They need
okay.
term limits.
Yeah, and it's just they got stuck in their ways, um, and the repercussions were felt in the classroom,
Mhm.
on the teacher level. Um, and it was just kind of like they would shrug their shoulders and just be like, "Well, oh, here's a book on classroom management skills. I don't know what to tell you." Whoa. And
Yeah.
it was just I had a different vision of how the whole system should have worked, and unfortunately for those first 2 years, that's not how it worked. But then going into the third year under new administration, um, that individual was a lot more. They wanted your feedback.
Yeah.
They seeked your feedback. They wanted to hear what's working, what's not, because it only works if we all work together. Not, oh, I'm sorry to hear that's not working. Again, here's a book on classroom management strategies. Bye bye. It's
Yeah. Well,
so
I think my take on it, just as a third party, you know it better than I do, but from my observations and our conversations, it almost seemed like you were becoming a scapegoat for someone else's lack of leadership. And it because there were, because I mean, I flat out heard the administrative assistant, which for people that not listening, that's basically like an assistant principal in training. They come in and they're paid, they're the same level as a teacher, but they work with the assistant principal and run assistant principal stuff. But there was an incident I heard. I had my kids were at music or something, and I heard her undermine your authority in front of a student. And like, to me, that's that's the worst thing you can do to anybody that you want to work for you. And it drove me nuts to hear that.
yeah, it was definitely. And this is probably leading to a bigger question, but um, when you have someone again in a leadership role that is now very complacent
Mm-hmm.
in their habits and how they do things, they are then teaching that culture to the front office staff. They're teaching
Mm-hmm.
that culture to anyone that's below them, because I mean they are the face and the voice of that building. And it just like anywhere else, it starts from the top down. And it was very, the word is, I would say, systemic. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, you could just kind of feel it in the office and the administrative assistant. And they really weren't working on your side.
Yeah.
They, it was always kind of like a, well, what can you do different, was always the conversation. Um, and that's what drove me insane. Was, well, what can you do different, Mr. Phillips? And these would be issues that have been brought to their attention dozens of times, and every time it was like, well, what can you do different? It's like, well, no, that's not, no.
Yeah.
No.
and
So
and
yeah.
asking a first or second year teacher, to me, like my first 3 years of teaching, like I want to call up all my students from those years and apologize for my first 3 years of teaching, because I was like, oh, trying to figure it out. But like, leadership trickles down, and I noticed, under the Vaughn administration, like, yeah, that even though I left, it was like we were talking offline. I left not because of her. It was like she's to me was the best possible principal I could have, and yet I still needed to leave. It was my time to leave. But like, I think that you could tell how even the assistant principal was happier under her. Like, that like a lot of things, when leadership goes from what can you do to change this versus how can I help you?
Yeah,
When
how can we fix this? Not what can you do,
Yeah,
but how can we was the
we as a team.
key word. How can we fix this? What tools or resources do you need from me? It wasn't just, whoa, okay, well, here you go.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, who's to say? I mean, who's to say why, that individual got to that point? Like I said, I keep saying complacency. I don't know what other term to use. But I mean, I had parents reaching out to me saying, hey, how can I get a hold of this individual? Like,
Yeah.
I can't get a hold of them. And, you know, having them be on the morning announcements, and then having students of the school turn and look at each other and scratch their head and go, who was that? I mean, that was a very alarming day for me as the teacher of the building, to see that happen in the
Yeah.
classroom. Like, they're on the morning announcements, and the kids are like, uh, who was that?
I had a kid ask me. They thought Mr. Smead was the principal. They
Yeah, I
thought.
mean, that's just, I mean, that's not a good look. I mean, for anyone. I mean, for anyone, let alone
Yeah.
let alone the principal of the building. And like you said, I just really felt like I was left out to dry. I mean, they were moving kids into my classroom that they fully knew had issues with a student in that classroom already, and they would just drop them off, and they would tell me, keep them apart as best you can, and they would just kind of give me that little thumbs up, and then they would walk away. And then when
Yeah.
and then
Like
when
the
issues would
blackjack
occur,
dealer.
yeah, and then when issues would occur and I'd bring it to their attention, they'd be like, well, what are you doing, Mr. Phillips? It's like, no, you ding dongs, you put this individual in my room fully knowing they had issues with another person. um and yeah, that second year was definitely, for myself personally, that was the worst version of myself as an educator. I, you know, I never wanted to. These words came out of my mouth, but I bluntly told my class I hate them, and
Mhm.
I didn't. I did. It was. I hit a very low point. I didn't know what to do. I was very unsupportive by my administration, and it was just, these kids were looked at as just test scores on a sheet of paper. They were not
Yeah.
taken in consideration as young individuals that get along with some kids and don't get along with others. And instead, it was very black and white. Administration just took the low kids and went, shoop, you're all in this one room, and took the other kids and went, shoop, you're all in this room. And it should never have been that way. And yeah, that was a very low point in my education. I never wanted to see that version of myself, but hey, we bounced back. We're good now. We all have
Mhm.
those moments. I'm only human.
Yeah.
I did apologize to my class. For all the listeners out there, I should say, I
Yeah.
did I did have an apology talk with them, and I did clarify it wasn't them as individuals I hated. It was the
Mhm.
behaviors that I was seeing and they were exhibiting on a constant day-to-day basis. Just the teasing and name calling and the flat out bullying, blatantly bullying, and the targeting of individuals, and it was all around bad.
Yeah,
So,
and just to illustrate for listeners, this isn't like a bunch of rowdy kids. I mean, this was a hostile environment. I mean, you had kids. There's one, and like there was one kid who, and I found out more like after I left. I found out more about this kid's backstory, but like how sad it was. Like you definitely you walk a mile in these kids' shoes, you find out more of what's going on. But this kid was an a hole. Yeah, it didn't. You're still an a hole, but like you would write him a referral, so you would send him to the office because you couldn't teach with him the way he was, and they would dismiss the referral. They send them right back to you, or they'd say that referral doesn't count. And
yeah,
it's
I mean, this individual. I mean, um, I did my due diligence, and I went and looked at his school record, and I saw that this individual since kindergarten was having issues with, um, the same problem. Problems with authority, bullying, teasing, name calling, so forth, etc.
mhm,
From kindergarten all the way up until fourth grade, and these were at different schools in a different state. Um, I had a red folder filled with notes, documentation, running records, anecdotals. I took that information to my principal, and I bluntly said, if we don't meet this child's needs, because he
yeah,
clearly needs them,
mhm,
it's going to be the same thing next year with a different teacher in a different class. And the principal at that time looked me in the face and said, Mr. Phillips, you're probably right. And at that meeting, I just shut off and I just smiled and nodded the rest of the time. And that meeting ended with them handing me a book of classroom management strategies. Um, and that was probably in like March or April.
mhm,
So I knew at that point there was nothing going to be done. And, just moving forward, that individual, well, wouldn't you know it, they acted the same way with the fifth grade teacher, to the point where they're now 10, 11 years old, and they have 2 police reports filed on them. I mean, I don't I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
you wanna do the best you can for these kids, and,
And it's not
unfortunately,
fair to them.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
unfair to them.
It's not fair to them because, like the kid annoyed me, but I'm sure he drove you up the wall, but
Ugh,
like,
bananas.
but like he's the symptom, of the
Yes,
problem
yeah.
is where the system is is not helping this kid find a path. And they're right. How many times, like in that year, how many of those kids were just written off as bad kids instead of getting the support that they needed?
Oh,
I
yeah, I mean,
have you been?
he definitely drove me bonkers, but, I mean, I went to that office a couple times a year as an advocate for him just because I'm like, "Okay, look, he has these issues,
Mhm.
and I am exhausted. Like, my toolkit is empty, like, I
Yeah.
need more help from them," and their response every time was, "Have you tried tracking it?" And I'm like, "Well, no, because I'm just tracking how much of an asshole he is, and I know that. Like, I know, like, this is a known fact." And it's just like, what am I tracking? We know what we're tracking. Like, can we stop tracking it?
Yeah.
Like, we need like the emergency team for this individual. We really need to help this young man out. And I was kind of just like pushed off to the side,
Do you
left
think
out in
it
the wind.
was do you think it was like do you think it was they were hiding their incompetence, or do you think that they legitimately thought that they were doing the right thing?
I don't even. I mean, like, I don't know, because like, oh, sorry, um, because it's I I dare I say that they didn't know what to do. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. I would hate to say that, but I mean, you know, there there were some times that you don't the downtown guidebook on behavior management skills. Sometimes that's not the answer for these kids. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
have some type of moral compass where you don't just pull a binder off of a shelf and lick your finger, flip some pages, and go shh, 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 go, okay, well, blankety blank blank, it says right here, because like that shouldn't be the end all be all for every kid. Every kid is a different story.
Mhm.
You have to be adaptive, you have to be flexible. There are red herrings in these situations. You have these kids whose behaviors don't fit that binder. Their backgrounds and their experiences that they're bringing to the school are vastly different from individual to individual. I mean, even you and I, your experiences and my
Mhm.
experiences as even grown adults are vastly different. But it's like, how do we meet in the middle? And I just never felt like I was being met in the middle. um, Anytime. I mean, I actually walked out on a meeting with the administrative assistant when they recommended I track his behavior for the fifth time that year. And I told the administrative assistant, I was like, "Do you know the definition of insanity?" And they looked at me and I said, "That's doing the same thing and expecting the same result." And I got up and walked out because
Yeah.
I refused to track this individual's behavior for the umpteenth time for who knows what reason. I guess for them, so they slept comfortable at night. But I mean,
Well, it's
yeah,
back on you. They didn't have to
it
do anything. They didn't have to
yeah,
deal
it
with it.
just yeah, the responsibility kind of went back on me. Um, and just again for the listeners, this I know we're focusing on this one individual, but it's a good case in point is that this
Mhm.
behavior wasn't just localized to the classroom. I mean, this was at gym, this was at the cafeteria, this was
Yeah.
in the hallway, this was at specials, this was at music, this was to other teachers, this was to other kids in other class. I mean, it was chronic is the
Yeah.
word. um
And not
and then
just and he wasn't the only issue, and he
oh
wasn't
no,
the only
yeah.
and your class wasn't the only issue too. I mean, there
No,
was
yeah,
issues
I
with a
mean,
lot of folks.
this goes right back to what you're saying, where that year off, eating Takis, playing Fortnite. I mean, we really saw the damage that did for these young minds. Like a lot of
Mhm.
kids, they need that regimentation. They need um, those social interactions. They need to learn that people disagree and that's okay. It's not they disagree and then it just turns into smack talk, because again, that's what they're used to in video games and society, and that's what's perpetuated. But they need to learn that someone disagrees with you, that's okay.
Mhm.
Or sometimes you don't get first, man. There's winners, there's losers. Kids have to learn that they have to learn to lose.
Yeah,
you know
they
Sorry, I
need
don't want
those
to get I
coping.
don't want yeah, I don't want to get far off the topic, but
No, they need those coping skills, and they need to
yeah.
learn those coping. And that was another thing too, is how many kids came to fourth grade with struggling with those coping skills, being able to resolve difference. Yeah, just really struggling with a lot of those things. The
Yeah.
the have you been following the teacher in Newport News that was shot by a 6 year old?
Um, I followed it briefly, and then I kind of stopped following it because it just made me so angry
Yeah.
at the system as a whole. Because
Hmm.
um, the student that we were just talking about. I mean, he's a prime example of you know a teacher is advocating for the student to help him or her, help them, in it's some other capacity, and they're just getting brushed off, and then
Yeah.
look what happened. It could have been. Then whenever a situation reaches that climax, every time it comes out in the news or wherever, it always goes back to, oh, well, they someone was there pointing out the signs early on, and then the other people were like not taking it seriously. And that's usually the case with
Yeah.
most of these. And that was another one of those cases. So,
All right, we're going to take a quick break from solving all of the world's problems to tell you about a good friend of mine and a service she's offering. Are you tired of feeling like your dream financial future is out of reach? Are you struggling with overwhelming debt, trying to pay off your home early, or simply wanting to give more? Well, my good friend Vanessa Rudder Jackson is here to help. An educator and military veteran, Vanessa is here to guide you through the confusion and make your dream financial future a reality. With her certified financial coaching services, she'll help you create a personalized plan that sets you up to win with money. As an educator and a mother of two, Vanessa understands the challenges of scraping by and stretching paychecks. She's been there, and she knows how to navigate the financial landscape to help you thrive. Don't let financial stress hold you back any longer. Take the first step towards financial freedom today with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching. Reach out to Vanessa today for a free 45-minute consultation at varudder34 at gmail.com or go to tinyurl.com/rjmoneycoach. That's varudder34 at gmail.com or tinyurl.com/rjmoneycoach. Remember, it's never too late to take control of your finances and achieve your dreams. Start your journey to financial freedom with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching today. All right, now let's get back to solving the world's problem with the most charming host on the interwebs.
so I actually, and this was after you left the school, but I had to deal with a very real situation with one of my students that up until that point in my career, I've never encountered this. Um, so this ties into a couple questions such as support from administration and um, you know uh, changing of administration at my school and just how much of a difference that makes. So this year, new administration. Um, Now I had this young man, and he kind of came with me with a disclaimer. I met with his parents beginning of the year. I kind of had a little background as to certain things that were going on, and certain things that he needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, to get to the meat and potatoes of it, um, he he wrote a note, and this is probably like February, March. He wrote a note, and I was with a small group, and he was handing the note out, but I could tell by the students that were unfolding and reading this note, they were like, whoa, I do not want this. And I asked this other young man, he was one of my higher students, very responsible individual. I was like, hey, can you bring that over here, please? He brought it over and he had this look on his face. And he's like, Mr. Phillips, this is very inappropriate. I'm not a part of it. And he handed it to me. I unfolded this note, and this was a suicide note written by a 10-year-old. It said, "Hello, my name is blank. Please kill me." And then it said at the bottom, "P.S. This is so and so. Please kill me." And my class had to go to PE in about 10 minutes. So I'm like, okay, I just don't make a scene, get him the gym, and then I'll handle this.
Mhm.
Well, I actually didn't end up having to do that. The administrative assistant, who was also new this past year,
Yeah.
actually came to my room, pulled me out, and said, Mr. Phillips, I need to speak with you in private. And they said, we just got notified by the district. We have to confiscate someone's Chromebook immediately. And when I inquired as to why, well, this individual was researching on Google, you know, how to kill himself, the best way to kill himself, how to kill humans, the best way to kill humans.
Wow.
So the administrative assistant was like, we need to debrief with this young man immediately. Um, and the point I'm getting at is it was an all hands on deck situation. I was
Mhm.
very supported by administration. They were like, we need to do a threat assessment. Parents were notified. He was pulled from the classroom. Meeting was scheduled. I mean, I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to contact the parents. Like it was, they, they, they knew the gravity of the situation. And I felt way more supported in that situation
Wow.
than I ever have. I mean, they were like, no, this is serious. I wasn't handed a book on classroom management strategies.
Oh.
I wasn't, they didn't turn the
What?
finger on me and say, "What are you doing?" They were like, "Holy guacamole, this
Yeah.
is serious stuff." And
We'll meet
it,
we'll meet again when he's written 6 more notes. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because I had a situation the previous year under the different administration where this other young man drew 6 pictures of himself killing another student in that class, and he put those drawings on that individual's desk for that individual to see. I mean, very, in
Mhm.
my word, very premeditated.
Mhm.
And in each picture, he wrote if he was killing him with a sword, he put sword or a gun. Like he was very specific. He put his name and the victim's name in every single photo. I mean, this was like heavy duty stuff.
Mm.
And when that got turned over to administration that year, he just got a very small suspension, and it was chalked up to he was, believe it or not, just journaling his feelings, Mr. Phillips. He was just journaling his feelings. Um, and then moving forward, that student in 5th grade threatened another student. He was going to go home and get his gun and knife and end their life. So that's what happens when it's not taken seriously. It
Yeah.
just it perpetuates it and it just continues. But here we have different administrative assistant, different individual coming coming to school with very serious thoughts of self-harm and threats
Yeah.
of self-harm, and has physically tried to commit acts of self-harm. I mean, again, people, this is a 10-year-old kid, and administration was like, we don't play that game. um, and like I said, the greater point I'm trying to make is that the support I felt was just, it was monumental. It was
Mm.
black and white from previous
Yeah.
administration
Night and
to
day.
this administration, night and day. um, I mean, that they ended up moving, but I felt while they were in my classroom, um, I felt like we, as a team, we were doing the best we could for the individual, as far as seating and all the things, priority seating, all that kind of stuff. And it just made me feel a lot more supported moving forward, knowing like, okay, they really took this situation very seriously. I know if anything else happens close to that or greater than that, like they're gonna have
They've
my
got your
back.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I even had the principal called me to the office and even said, "Hey, Mr. Phillips, like we're here for you. Um, you don't worry about anything." Like and they really kind of took took me, and they're like, "We got this. You did nothing wrong. Like these are very serious things." They're like, "You're not a therapist, you're not a psychiatrist, you're a
Mm.
teacher. You are not trained to." And it was just kind of like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. You're right. I'm just a teacher." And they're like, "This is this is beyond the scope of our school. I mean, they made it a
Yeah.
they're like, this is beyond the scope of our school. Like, we are a school. We're not a mental health unit, you know, and we're going to try the best we can with our tools to meet the needs of this individual. Um, so yeah, not
No,
to, sorry, I kind of got off on a tangent there,
no,
but
you're heading. I mean, the difference in leadership and feeling supported. It's so desperately needed in the education system, and it almost feels like the system bureaucracy almost deters good leaders from being in those positions. I mean, we're White Oaks is lucky to have her and have that team like and night and day with the administrative assistants too. Because I recall the administrative assistant we had the previous year, the one that undermined your authority. I was like, oh, that's terrible. But the one we had before I left was tremendous. Like I felt was there to support, and I
oh,
think a lot of that.
total rock star. I mean, just
Yeah,
came in, just, amazing,
I think
amazing.
that's tremendous, and yeah, it's one of those things that like going back to the school shooter, the 6-year-old that shot the teacher. Um, once that yeah, the she filed the lawsuit, uh, because there were several times where they made the administration aware of what was going on and they brushed it off, and then he shot her, and now they're trying to say that it's his disability manifesting itself. And
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh no,
What
I
were
was
you?
gonna say that. So that student I was mentioning, um, with the suicidal thoughts at the meeting. I mean, there was a good number of professionals that work with the school district at this meeting, including the parents. And the parents were saying, well, it's because of his disability. And thankfully, the people that were there were like, that's pretty loosely connected to be exhibiting this just because he's blank or blank. Um, but the parents were reassured that instead of just telling them no, the parents were just told, okay, okay, that may be the case, but moving forward, if he says X, Y, and Z, does this or that, this is what's going to happen every single time, just to make those parents aware that he wasn't being singled out and that this is the school's protocol and that
Yeah,
we are federally mandated by the state to do this stuff. I mean,
yeah,
it's not fun, it's not pretty, it comes with the territory, but just knowing that and just making the parents aware, like, okay, you can say that, that's perfectly fine, we're not saying no, but if he says anything of self-harm or threatens anyone, like, we are mandated to do these things every single time, so moving forward he can continue to exhibit that behavior, but this is going to happen every single time, blank.
yeah,
And then I think just making that known to the parents, you could kind of see them kind of sit back in their chair a little bit and like, oh,
yeah.
like it's like we weren't trying to be dicks about it, but we were also like, we're kind of like tied here, like by the federal, like we're federally mandated to do this kind of stuff, and
Yeah,
it's
there's
not,
no wiggle room here. Yeah, this isn't.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, this is for our protection, your child's protection. This is to keep everyone safe. The parents that send their schools or the parents that send their kids to school every day under the pretense, like, am I sending my kid to a safe school? Are they going
yeah.
to come home in one piece? I mean, that's why we have these protocols set in place. That's why we have all these trainings and so on and so forth.
There's a rise in a lot of parents now homeschooling too, just for not just because their frustration with curriculum, but like they don't feel like their kid's safe. Was it Austin, Texas? There's a school that bought clear backpacks so that they can see what's in kids' bags and to see, basically to see if there's a gun in it or not. And it's kind of like I almost feel like that's great, but these solutions seem like they're band aids and not addressing the cause. Do you think are we setting up these kids for a false sense of reality when they get out
Yes.
in the real world?
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying, the coping skills. I mean, we're not teaching these young people basic uh, conflict resolution skills. Having a debate. Again, someone might not agree with you, but that doesn't mean you have to start saying comments about their mom, or I mean, like, just smack talking them. I mean, like, this is not a
Yeah.
video game. Like, this is real life. Um, I had a situation. It was this past school year. It was the last day and a half of school, and I had a new student, and he was a very angry young man. I don't know how else to say it. He was just very angry, just lots of yelling, lots of name calling, and just all around, just very angry, like very angry.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, it was easier for me to tell my other students to ignore him than tell him to stop, because he just either he couldn't control it or he didn't want to control it. But point being
Yeah.
is that um, he ended up throwing a chair across my classroom towards another student because he kept yelling at them for them to, shut up, be quiet. He was calling them names, and I kept telling that other group, look, just ignore him, just ignore him. And then
Mhm.
the one student was fed up with it, and he stood up and said, make me. So ergo, he threw the chair. um, I then had a conversation with him and then the class later, just explaining to them, using that as a teachable moment, saying, because that student, he was suspended. He started his summer vacation 2 days early. Anyways, um, with him not being there, I took that time just to remind the class that um, sometimes in life, it's just best to ignore certain people. Mr. Phillips is not always going to be there to protect them. Their parents are not always going to be there to protect them. And I kind of took that moment as sometimes you just shouldn't say anything and just point it out. Well, because he said, make me, he threw the chair. If he didn't say make me, the other guy probably wouldn't have thrown the chair. But just making these kids realize that that's kind of where the society is. You could bump into someone walking down a street and they could say something. You could say, make me. And I told these students, they could have a gun. They could have a knife.
Yeah.
I was like, you just don't know. Um, but I feel like we're just kind of putting a band aid on it. We're not teaching them, like you said, those coping skills, the conflict resolution skills, that just having a basic debate, conversation, like, hey, I want to know why you think this way, and I'll explain to you why I think this way. And then just
Mhm.
having a greater sense of understanding, you know?
It almost sounded like though, like the frustration that kid felt was similar to the frustration you were feeling when you were going to the administration saying, "Hey, help me address this problem," and they kept brushing it off, almost wanting you to either ignore it or like they were ignoring it. And
Yeah.
it was like putting you into a position where you're like you wanted to say make me. Or
Yeah.
that maybe that's yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's and I almost feel like that we're creating a society where in school when we're making all these exceptions based on some some and I hate to I've been in enough IP meetings where a lot of these accommodations are very kind of vague and loosely
They're
worded and
very flimsy.
yeah yeah
Very flimsy.
and they're kind of like what and a lot of times I've had to speak up and tell parents like I'm not entirely sure that's gonna work and I think sometimes I get the feeling that the parents like some administrators are not all administrators. I think some White Oaks is an exception, but some administrators are afraid of parents of making them sue happy, so they
Yeah.
they kind of bend a little bit. And do you do you think we're going to get to a point in society where adults will have IEPs? Like if I run at red light, but I've got an IEP, they can't write me a ticket.
I mean, it's definitely, um, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely to the point where, like, the educator can, call home, and like, it's an exaggeration. It's not every parent is this way or every family is this way, but I've experienced it enough in a very short time where it's, you call home and then the parent believes I'm just using fourth grade as a reference, but then the
Yeah,
parent's like, oh, well, my 9 or 10-year-old said this. I mean, the parent is taking the word of a 9 or 10-year-old over the adult that is in the
yeah,
classroom with that child, seeing their interactions with other individuals on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And the fact that there's a finger pointing back and not a, oh, I understand, how can we rectify this? I mean, that is the crux of the problem. Is a lot of these parents are just, and families are just kind of like, or well, like, there's a lot of accountability is the big word here being put back on my shoulders or your
Mhm.
shoulders or any educator. I mean, we're really being, the wick is burning at both ends. I mean, we have to try to make up for a lot of those gaps because of the pandemic, coming back full circle with that. Um, yeah.
Do you feel like do you feel that teachers are respected in society as they should be?
Um, can I hold back my laugh?
Well, let me rephrase the question. Why is it that, like, because why is it that it feels like teachers are so disrespected? I mean, I'm still like fighting, I'll post something or I'll see something and I'll look in the comments and there's still people with misconceptions about what a teacher has to do. And, oh, you guys get summers off, or, oh, you guys get paid the same as anybody else. And it's like they have no clue as what we do. Why do you think teachers are so disrespected in society?
Oh God. Because as a society, it's not where we place our values. We place our values on money. And I mean, for
Interesting.
example, my barber, the guy who cuts my hair, makes over $100,000 a year. The guy who cuts my hair, he's a
Hmm.
barber, right? If you want to be a teacher in this specific school district, you have to work for more years than I have been alive on this earth to hit your top pay scale. And that's still not even $100,000. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
work 40 years to get into the 90s. Like, I'm 36, going to be turning 37. Like, you have to work more years than I've been alive to hit that. But um, it's just where society places its values. I mean, you can make millions of dollars just TikToking or whatever people do. I mean, like, you need no educational background to do that. And, you know, we're not, um, we're not focusing on those important skills. And it's just, it's like the immediate gratification. People are like, well, if I can just make $1 million, doing dumb stuff on the internet, why do I need to know fractions? And, we're not creating independent thinkers. I mean, we now have a
Mm.
generation of kids that would rather watch someone else playing the video game of the video game they own, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
absurd to me. I mean, I took a class outside last year to play kickball. Holy cow, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to run the bases. They didn't know how to play positions. They didn't know that you can actually get the ball to home plate faster if you throw it than running it from the outfield. I mean, I had kids picking up the ball in the outfield trying to run all the way to home base. I mean, it was the bad news bears. I had to play kickball tutorial videos. I mean, we have kids that don't know how to play kickball. And, but that, that's a little parking lot conversation, but I just don't feel like, the respect just isn't there. And I'm not saying, like, we have to be put on this like ivory tower or this
Yeah.
pedestal, but a phone call home when I was a kid meant a lot different than when I
Hmm.
phone call home parents today,
Yeah.
right? Like, a phone call home when I was a kid was like, that is not good. A phone call home nowadays is like, oh, okay, whatever. What are you doing to help my child? And it's just like, well, listen, I am, but like, I'm calling you because what I'm doing is not working. So, like, I need you to get on the same team so we can, like, tackle this problem.
Yeah.
Not, well, brushing it off. And I just feel we're losing we're losing sight of what's really important. I mean, teaching is one of the most important professions in the entire world. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not putting any other profession down, but where would any great engineer, doctor, lawyer, I mean, you name it, if and not just a teacher, I'll say an educator, because everyone's an educator, whether you're in teaching or not. Everyone is
Hmm.
a teacher to some capacity. And where would any of those individuals be if someone with educational skills or teachings didn't come along their way and just push that first domino over? Like,
Yeah.
they would be nowhere. They would be nowhere. And I've heard in the past, oh, you're a teacher, you just brainwash kids. And
Oh, that drives me nuts. The
yeah,
indoctrination thing, like that drives me. They have no clue. In fact, there's the like. First of all, we have a say in what we're told to teach, and then those of us that go rogue and try to make it interesting. We're not the. I do think that we know that there's one or two teachers out there that's that probably shouldn't be teaching, but that's like 1%. The 99% of us teachers, we're here because we we we're insane because we want to help other people's kids. You
we
know,
are we are insane.
yeah, I mean, literally, we're like, blah, 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 blah. Hey, I don't want to I'm here to help your kid, and it's like that. I'm not here to tell them to vote Trump or Biden or to believe that the Earth is flat. I'm here to get. In fact, the reason I got into teaching was to try to stimulate critical thinkers. I want them to debate and question things, but it's like I hear that kind of argument, and it's funny because it's like again, it's another situation where the teachers are the ones getting the heat for what the education system, the education department is doing. It's like we're
Correct.
not coming up with this. This isn't us.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
just trying to keep your kid from throwing a chair.
yeah, it's like these are the orders the general gave me. I'm just going out and executing the orders, right? That's it.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, there's just and it's not to say like all parents and families, but it's just one, it's a societal thing. It's where
yeah,
society places its values. And it's just in general, just like there's like some societal disconnect with the importance of or for teaching. Um, I don't know, somewhere along the way we just kind of lost that spark for learning, right? That lust for learning. Now it's
yeah,
just kind of all like beep, boop, boop, programming, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
And it's up to certain individuals to then, reinvigorate, get these kids excited, you know. Um, and I flat out tell my students, hey, I might not know the answer to your question, but I'm going to show you how to find the answer. And I think that's way more important of a life
yeah.
skill to know on how to fix your problem than just get the answer.
So it's the old teach them to fish rather than give them a fish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, I mean that's like that is kind of like a loaded question, but I do feel like it's a lot of it is societal. Um, it's also the amount of time and patience and effort that, and any teacher will tell you, that we put into this job, the countless hours after hours on weekends and planning, and the amount of time that we put into it. Um, and then on the fiscal side, on the financial side, to know that it's one of the only major professions that hasn't seen a large annual pay increase since the 80s.
Yeah,
We're still like
but but
paying
the
people in the Stone Age.
but there's been quite an increase in getting an education degree, which is very interesting. That's a whole nother podcast right there.
Oh yeah, I heard on the radio a couple months ago where Virginia, our state, is number 5 in the top 5 states to live in based on education. Um, and the radio DJs said that. The other radio DJs was like, "Well, I didn't know that." And then the original host said, "Yeah, and Virginia has predominantly been known not to pay its teachers very well." And I was laughing so hard. Um, and it's just
Yeah,
like, yeah, how are we number 5 and we're predominantly known for not paying our teachers very well, you know?
yeah. We pay the colleges well. That's a different story.
Yeah, yeah,
That's an
yeah,
entirely different story.
yeah.
I as you and I share a biological quality that is unique, as you alluded to earlier, and I think so. And I'm not going to sit here and play the violin for us, but you and I, as male teachers, do you feel like have you ever felt like because this is something that's bothered me sometimes where I was told like I would do, like work miracles in my classroom with behavior management, and then it would be almost dismissive like, well, you're a male teacher so they respond to you. Have you ever felt I dare say, like sexism, but we're in a predominantly female profession. And have you ever felt like, well, you're a male teacher, so like that your gender had anything to do with your effectiveness as a teacher, or rather, the perceived effectiveness? Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, absolutely. And I also feel like that has not a large impact, but I also feel like that has a small impact as to why I get the certain students that I get.
Yeah.
I get the quote unquote heavy hitters. Um, but I think it just boils down to the fact that it doesn't matter what is the gender of the person
Hmm.
sitting across from you. I think it's at a certain point, you just got to really talk to these kids. Like, you just got to get
Yeah.
real with them at some point.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to talk to them, like, get real with them and just like not sugarcoat it, like from some nurturing background, or like sometimes they just need to hear it. And that always kind of worked for me. Like, I mean, you do have to gauge it, you can't do it with every student, but like, certain students that you have a good rapport with, you know, and you can gauge their level of maturity based on other previous
Hmm.
conversations. Like, sometimes those are the students, like, they need that. Like, they need that feedback because that's how they're spoken to at home. Like, their parents don't cater to that, they don't sugarcoat it, like they're just like bam. And I have found that over the years that sometimes you just gotta tell them how it is.
Yeah.
And I've always found that that has worked dividends for me, because that kind of breaks down some barriers between you and that student. They realize, he's actually, Mr. Phillips is a real guy.
Yeah.
He's actually a real person. He's not just some teacher robot up there doing this or that. Like, he's actually a real guy. And I mean, kids thrive on that. They want to be talked to like they're young adults. I mean, that's what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're growing up, they're maturing. And that's what they want. They want those interactions. They don't want all the you know the pampering. I'll
Oh,
say,
and
I don't know how
yeah,
else to
the
say that,
fake
but
no,
you
like
know
that lobotomized smile, the fake positivity, like the coddling. Kids can smell BS a mile away.
oh, dude,
You
they're
know,
smarter than we give them credit for. And
a
I just
lot.
feel
Yeah.
like, you know sometimes you just got to give way, and you just got to tell them how it is, in a
Hmm.
constructive manner. But I mean, like, you just have to give them the tools.
They
And
appreciate you being genuine with them too.
absolutely, yeah, they kind of, they like that. I've found that the kids I've done that with, I end up having a better relationship with them for the remainder of the year after we reach that point,
Hmm.
because they kind of realize, like, hey, I'm here to like help you and guide you, but like whatever this issue is, whether it's social or emotional or academic or whatever, but like, here's what you need to do, and like, you're sucking at it, so like, we gotta fix it, right? Like, not like
Yeah.
that, but just kind of
Yeah. Here,
like
we need you out of here. Yeah.
but kind of like motivating these kids along. I mean, I'll use their Lexile levels, like their RI levels. Um, and just really telling these kids, like, hey, your levels here, like, okay, that's good, but like, I want you to get here, and
Hmm.
like, that this is where you need to be, young man, like, or young lady, like, this is where I want to see you. Like, that's cool, like where you're at, but like, come on, you can do better. And just really putting them on the spot, and just kind of, how can we get to you? What do you need? What carrot do you need me to dangle for you?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Finding
But
that's classic Carol and Ann Tomlinson. You got to know your students and what motivates them before you
yeah,
can.
but I do feel that it sometimes, my gender does play into, my classroom dynamic or certain students, but I also feel like it just boils down to like that person, and you just have to
Mhm.
know, when do you just have to just hit them with the truth and just be like, hey, we got to, whatever.
All right, look
So
here.
yeah.
Let me holler
Yeah.
at you. Come over
Yeah.
here. That absolutely. That. It's crazy. So last year was your first year teaching gifted. How was that different? And is it fair to judge it based on your previous year, or like
um
what did you notice?
so I have found that I really liked gifted a lot, because for me, if I'm not being challenged as an adult, like, if I'm not invested in it, like, how can I be excited to teach it to a kid? Like, if I'm reading something as an adult and I'm bored,
Yeah.
how is a 10-year-old going to be excited about it? And I just found that with gifted, I was able to like take a concept and like make it harder, and then really push these kind of kids. And for me, I had fun with that because it put the pressure on me to make it challenging but not too challenging, where
Hmm.
before I had to take something and just water it down to the point where I was, I'm in fourth grade and I was teaching first grade skills. I mean, for
Yeah.
me, I was like, it was like my feet were in the mud, and I was just like, every day it was just like,
Hmm.
like it was like we were making no headway. Um, and I just, as an educator, that was just not my place. Um, and some people thrive in inclusion, some people thrive in gifted. I know my other coworker, he loves inclusion, like he loves it. That's his
Hmm.
sweet tooth. That's what he
Yeah.
likes. um and it just, for me, that was my role for 2 years. But then that third year, where last year I had gifted, it was a lot more fun because um I was able to do a lot of the things I wanted to do in the previous years. And the kids, they weren't so what's the word here? They weren't so against it, right? They were
Hmm.
open to the idea. They weren't pushing against it. Um, Now moving into our fourth year, um, and I'm sure you'll agree that the previous class assignments were way too black and white as far
Hmm.
as how the kids were assigned to their
Yeah.
classes. Um, this past year, they were mixed up a little bit, but this, going into our fourth year with the new administration, we have been told, and I've seen with our class list, like it's the wealth has been spread, and that's what needed to happen
Yeah.
a long time ago. I mean, you can't put a whole bunch of kids, um, I'll just say low achievers, or kids that academically perform lower than the academic standard. You
Hmm.
can't put a whole classroom of kids like that together and not give them like someone that excels academically. Because to those kids, if you ask a question and no one raises their hand, like no one, to them they're like, "Pfft, this is
Yeah.
impossible." I
Yeah.
mean, like they have no one to role model or gravitate to them. They need to see like another student or two in the room knows that stuff. If no one knows it,
Yep.
to them they're like, this is impossible. um
Plus,
and then
kids are perceptive. They know if they're in the, like, I'm in the dummy class this year, or like I had a kid. I had a
oh
kid when
yeah.
I had a kid once. He said, "I'm why am I with the booger eaters?" That's what he told his mom. And I mean, it's that was his quote, not mine. But I wonder too, those, like, because if you have a kid that's struggling academically, they're gonna be frustrated. They're gonna have that aversion. I remember my first year face to face in fourth grade was I had a girl come in the first week of school. She says, I suck at math. I'm terrible at math. And I said, well, by the end of this year, you're gonna love it. And sure enough, by the end of the year, she loved it. I mean, but she just already had that self doubt because she was struggling with disabilities. But it's like they already have that aversion. And but if you have a class full of that,
It's
they're
so hard. I mean, you're you're
yeah,
you're trying to push the boulder up the hill. I mean, it's
yes,
so hard. But this goes back way previous in our conversation of like Montessori, where it's like you need those high flyers.
hmm,
Because like if you're working with your low lows in your room, then you can say, "Hey, I know so and so knows their timetables really well. Take this worksheet. I want you to work with them." And then you can have that person maybe working with someone that they don't normally work with.
yeah,
Then you're building in different friendships and societal skills and cooperating skills. Um, but that builds in that self direction, because you need those high kids. One, you need them as a teacher to flex on. Like you have to have those kids to rely on, um, because having that in the classroom allows you to focus on the ones that really, really need it. The high
yeah,
guys, they already know it. I mean, your
hmm,
job is just to make it a smidge harder. And then, we got to bring those low guys, we got to bring them up, to make it equitable for everybody. I mean, you could spend all your time with the high kids and then just leave the low kids behind. But I mean, that's the discrepancy just grows exponentially. I mean, you have to,
hmm.
you know, put it
I
where it
found
needs to go.
I found though typically a lot of times it goes the other way because there's so much pressure that had been put on schools to pass the standardized test that the low kids get all the focus and the high kids don't get any attention. They don't get challenged. And it's like, it takes a teacher like yourself to find ways to challenge those high kids. It's like, oh, yeah, you got a 1400 Lexel. Guess what? Now I want you to do this project. Now I'm going to have you do this. Yeah, like finding ways to challenge these kids and so that they don't feel bored in school.
Correct. Yeah, and I really relied on some of my high kids this past year to be, little teachers in a way. Because if there was like a quiz or assessment or something coming up, like I knew they had the skills. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
that they have the skills. I had no reservations or doubts on them knowing the skills, but I needed those low ones to show me that they were making progress towards mastering that skill.
Yeah.
And then in between, during small group rotations or whatever, with those high guys, I would give them you know, so I would give them stuff that the other kids didn't get, and they love that because like, oh, and I would even tell them like, hey, you already know this stuff, so I'm going to give you something that's related. It's going to be a little harder, and they liked it. It was a
Yeah.
game for them, and I would let them either go in the hallway and work on it, or I would have them go up and ask the fifth grade teacher for some work, and I would have them work on it and say, okay, well, we'll come together in a couple of days and we'll see how far you get. Um, you know, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you though, about your other endeavor as champion bodybuilder.
Oh,
And
power
power
lifter.
lifter. Sorry, not body. Right, I stand corrected. Bodybuilding is much more like the pose down kind of stuff. Power
Yeah,
lifter. That's the raw. That's the meat.
yeah.
That's the
That's
power.
just
Yes.
lifting an arbitrary amount of weight for no real reason. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. I mean, that has this been a goal of yours for some time, and is the gym kind of like your zen?
Oh yeah. I mean, everyone has a hobby or needs something to decompress or to just focus and just unwind. And I have found over the years that I've always been physically active. Like I'm always doing something. I hate sitting still, and I got into physical education my senior year of high school and just kind of carried that with me, um, to the point where I started noticing, wow, I'm kind of strong at doing certain stuff, So then I went to the next level and I started following a program and I started seeing my lifts increase and then started getting feedback from other people at the gym asking me, "Oh, do you compete?" And no, I'm a guy that lifts. And they're like, "Oh, well, I thought you compete." And then just taking that to the next step. And then, it's lame when I say it out loud, but I'm on a lifting team. So yeah,
That's
I'm
not
on a,
lame. That's awesome.
and
It's
getting a
more than I've been
coach
doing.
and getting a coach
Hmm.
and, yeah, just kind of excelling. I mean, I've realized over the years that the human body is an amazing, amazing thing, and it is capable of phenomenal things. I mean, I weigh on the day of competition, I couldn't weigh more than 148.4 pounds. If I weighed more than that, they would bump me up to the next weight class. So I couldn't weigh more than 148.4 pounds the day of competition. And my max deadlift that day was 505 pounds, a quarter of a ton. So almost four times my body weight I can pick off the ground. Uh,
Wow.
and it's just insane, right? I mean, like, who would have thought, but
Yeah, I
it's just
mean,
kind of
I
fun.
hope you don't take me this the wrong way, but when you look at you, like just when you first meet you, you're a slim dude.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
especially sitting next to me.
Yeah.
I'm Mr. Buff here, but it's but yeah, I think a lot of that is and what a great example for kids too. Like for like, hey, Mr. Phillips, he won. Look what he did. He power lifted. Dude's a hoss. He can work. It's that's inspiring. Like, you don't give up. Don't just because of your size you can do accomplish a lot of things.
Yeah, it's just and it's just it gives you something to work towards, right? You have a goal, you reach it. What's the next goal? Okay, you work towards that. I had
Mhm.
my first goal was to just compete, so I did that. And even at my first competition ever and being pretty conservative with my lifts, I took second, right? I took second. Like I was,
Hmm.
and my coach and I, because he said he would rather me have a good time than have a bad time and not do it again. And at the end of the day, you're only competing against yourself. You can make
Ah,
it as competitive as you want, if you go to a competition, but really, it's really for you.
yeah.
Um, and I took second, and I just kind of took that and I just scaffolded it to my next competition, and I took first. Um, you know, and it's
And now when people ask you, you can go, which way to the beach? You can say, this way to the beach.
yeah.
Yeah, go this way.
I mean, Virginia is an open carry state, so I can pull my guns out anytime.
Yeah.
Get it? Ah!
Yeah. Do you have to register? Did you get a background check for those guns?
I
Those
did,
two.
I did. Yeah, a concealed carry permit. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's just it's fun. I mean, it really doesn't mean anything to anyone else. It's just my hobby. But it's just fun, and I like the gym atmosphere that I go to. No one wants to see anyone fail, right? And
Hmm.
there's a lot of things I feel like from the gym that I would love to carry over, or things that I carry over to my classroom.
Hmm.
Um, Such as like regimentation, consistency, continually working on something you're not good at, and how do you perfect the small things to then
Yeah.
improve the bigger picture. There's a lot of things I carry over from that, and like consistency, drill and repeat, accepting feedback. I mean, because there's I lived with to get better, I lift with guys that are better than me, or
Hmm.
lift more than me.
Yeah.
And the same concept applies in the classroom. If you have a kid that's not good with math, well, how do you get them? Well, you surround them with kids that are good with math, and then they're like a sponge. Like they're gonna start picking up on it.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of things that transfer back and forth from skills I've learned at the gym to things I implement in the classroom, or things that I you know would want my kids to learn.
I like I really like what you said too about you weren't competing with the other lifters, you were competing with yourself. And I think that happens a lot of times in the classroom. The kids see these other kids and they're always, I mean, you can't help it. It's human nature to compare yourself to other people, but
Yeah,
really they're only, they just got to be better than they were yesterday. And,
yeah. And that was kind
moving
of
forward.
like a conversation I had with my class a lot. Just
Hmm.
um, you know, diversity and the acceptance of other people being diverse. Okay, yes, so what, they know their math facts better, but guess what? You know, kick butt at science and they
Yeah.
don't. So it's just like, it's apples and oranges, and just realizing, like I said, in competition, like I'm only competing against myself. Like I'm
Hmm.
only trying to go up there and do the best that I can do, and just translating that into the classroom and making these kids realize, like, listen, not everyone's the best at everything, right? You're good at some things that people are not good at, and they're good at some things you're not. And that doesn't mean they're better or worse than you. It's just we're all different,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Well, Kyle, I feel great that we have solved all of the educational problems in under 2 hours. I think this is fantastic. So I was worried until then, and now we've solved it. But going in, this is going to drop next Thursday when a lot of teachers are already in the building, and the kids are coming back earlier than they used to. I think this year, and at least from Janice.
Yeah, I know.
Any what are your final, what are some words of advice, new teachers, veteran teachers, teachers, educators getting ready to start if they haven't already started, because I guess some districts that are already back, but what are some words of advice for starting this year?
Okay, we'll just compartmentalize this. Okay, for any new teachers, the best advice I could tell you is learn how to make it your own. Make it your own. That classroom is yours to command. Those kids come in, most of them respecting you, not all. Some you have to earn that trust, but that classroom is yours. Make it your own. Um, you know, Dare to step outside your comfort zone. You'd be surprised how many times you do something you're unfamiliar with and it is a home run or a grand slam. Um, Sometimes you just need to use that spaghetti method, throw it against the wall with them, see what sticks, you know, and don't be afraid to fail. Sometimes things, you'll fall flat on your face, and but that's how you learn. That's how your students learn. That's how we learn. But yeah, don't be afraid to make it your own. Get creative with it. I've seen so many classrooms that are so I say clinical or sterile, and it's just like womp womp, boo, tomato, right? Like,
No.
yeah, I don't know, like bring your personality into the classroom. That's what kids really remember, and some of the cool lessons you teach them. But yeah, learn how to make it your own. And yeah, that would be my advice for any new teacher stepping into the profession, because that's something they can't teach you. No book, no class is going to teach you how to make it your own. And it took me a couple years to really find my stride, and I feel like this past third year I really found it, and it was fun.
That's
It was
awesome.
the most fun I've had. I'll put it that way.
Well,
Yeah. I was gonna say for any. Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say for any current teacher, I was gonna say, here we are, starting the new year. We need to remember that we're all in this together, right? It takes a village, and we need to learn to rely on each other. Constructive criticism. We need the feedback as much as the kids do, and you know when the day is done, how do we, put it down and step away, take that break. Mental wellness is so important nowadays. And, check in with your neighbors. Check in with your neighbors. A simple hello, a simple goodbye. Hey, how you doing? Have a good weekend. I mean, even just that alone goes miles. Just a little check-in. Doesn't need to be a whole conversation. Just a simple, maybe some finger pistols. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
Cracking, man.
Yeah. Just something. And don't stress. We're all in this together, and we're gonna do great things. I know it.
Do the best you can. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this awesome chat. I love that we've solved all of the education problems in under
Great.
2
My
hours.
salary is gonna skyrocket once it drops. I know.
Woo-hoo! Awesome.
Yeah. Woo.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Educators Podcast this episode. And on behalf of the Mr. Powerman Kiel Phillips, this is Mr. Burden. And have a great year, everybody. Make it your own and do the best you can.
Awesome. Yes. Thanks, everyone. We'll have a great year. I'm saluting you, even though you can't see me. We can do this.
Maybe next time he'll want to be on camera, but he's not. We're having some issues with TMZ. The celebrity. We've got to respect his privacy.
Yeah. So, all right, everyone.
Yes, every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes to anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.